As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at NFLSundayTicket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
Shaq here, spinning fast-acting pain relief with Icy Hot. Ice works fast, heat makes it last. Icy Hot, you're so back.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast Roundup, your weekly look at conservation news from around the nation. This week brought to you by Bass Pro Shops, Richard Childress Racing, and Dallas Safari Club. Thank you all for your support. Top story this week, a recent executive order provides opportunities to improve access for saltwater anglers. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks finalizes the 25-26 wildlife and fisheries regulations. Hunting Heritage Protection Acts in the Northeast. Two-tier program seeks to reduce barrier to entry for duck hunters. Hunter education in schools coming to a state near you. All that and more, but let's get into the quick housekeeping. We are mere days away from the NASC Summit early bird registration expiring. So, if you are joining us in Memphis, Tennessee in December, save yourself some cash. Go on to the website now, congressionalsportsman.org. Sign up for the early bird discount, get registered, and encourage your colleagues at the State House, your partners in the State Fish and Wildlife Agency, wherever they're at next to you. Get those folks involved, and again, save some money with that discount. That's it. Let's get into this week's lead story. This is from Chris Horton. Unfortunately, Chris is on location, as is this program. So my apologies for the late publication on it. Nevertheless, we move on and bring you the news here. Here's the why it matters from Chris as it concerns the article. The recent executive order providing opportunities to improve access for saltwater anglers. Despite the increase in offshore recreational fishing in recent decades, federal marine fisheries management is still predominantly designed for commercial fisheries, where the primary value is in the maximum sustainable number of dead fish to be sold at the dock. The highest value for the nation from recreational fishing, on the other hand, is simply the opportunity to go fishing whether fish are caught or not in many cases. President Trump's recent Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness executive order provided an opportunity to highlight the value of recreational fishing and how it could be made better. In 2022 alone, recreational saltwater anglers in the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council region took 9 million fishing trips, supported 27,000 jobs, and spent $3.54 billion to take those trips. A presidential executive order early this year provided a formal opportunity for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation and others to weigh in on how we can manage our marine recreational fisheries for the better. In April of this year, President Trump issued an EO on the Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness. Since that time, the 8 regional fishery management councils have been soliciting stakeholder input on how to best address the opportunities presented by them. CSF recently partnered with the American Sport Fishing Association and the Coastal Conservation Association in providing our suggested actions through the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council's process, a region that sees more than 1/3 of all recreational saltwater fishing trips in the nation. While much of the executive order focuses on commercial fishing and the seafood industry, many of the policies and priorities equally apply to recreational fisheries such as addressing overregulation, ensuring access, improving fisheries management, and science and modernizing data collection. Along those lines, CSF and our partners urge the administration to consider, among others, the following: recognizing the economic, social, and cultural value of recreational fishing, both for personal sustenance and recreation; avoiding limited access privilege programs in the charter or hire industry that reduces access for non boat owning anglers; establishing more artificial reefs, which are an important conservation tool that can enhance and replace degrading natural structures such as coral reefs and increase habitat connectivity and metapopulation ecological benefits for species with high reef affinity; supporting state-led data collection and management as a pathway to improving data collection and access to recreational fisheries, as has been demonstrated in the Gulf of America region; collecting more robust recreational economic data by specific fisheries, which is currently lacking, severely lacking, for most recreational significant species; finally, encouraging the use of alternative management measures such as harvest control rules that provide more appropriate fishing access when stocks are doing well. CSF appreciates the tenets of the executive order and looks forward to working with the Secretary of Commerce and the regional fishery management councils to improve management of our recreational fisheries. Thank you to Chris for that contribution. And folks, I'm gonna apologize about my voice and sounding a little nasally. I have definitely come down with something in my travels. Um, so bear with me. We'll get you the news, I promise. Moving on here to Montana, where their Fish and Wildlife and Parks finalized the 2025-2026 wildlife fisheries regulations. This coming from Marie Newmiller. So the Montana Commission's August 21st, 2025 meeting finalized regulations for the upcoming 2025-26 hunting, fishing, and trapping seasons, along with considerations for several land and water projects shaping both management and public access plans for the coming year. The highlights here: the Commission took the Future Fisheries Improvement Program and its investment into aquatic ecosystems into consideration. Supported by CSF and coalition partners, Phase 2 of the Montana Great Outdoors Conservation Easement was moved one step closer to full approval as the state works to protect wildlife habitats and sporting access. New wolf and fur bearer regulations were adopted after a long and heated commission debate and a public comment period that included testimony from a variety of Montana Legislative Sportsman Caucus members. The decisions at the commission meeting influenced Montana's conservation efforts and outdoor recreation opportunities, shaped by input from sportsmen and women, legislators, Montana Fish and Wildlife Parks, and members of the general public. While some topics like conservation easements brought generalized support, rulemaking for predator management and trapping brought long, heated debate as commissioners worked to find balance. A few brief highlights from that meeting are as follows. From the Fisheries Division, recommendations from the Citizen Review Panel for the Future Fisheries Improvement Program projects were adopted, enhancing fish habitats, critical for anglers and aquatic ecosystems, bringing around $680,000 of agency funds, along with extensive matching funds to support projects like fish passage, creek restoration, and fish screens, among others. These investments will support Montana's fisheries, a cornerstone of the state's outdoor heritage. Items concerning Land and Water Unit, Phase 2 of the Montana Great Outdoors Conservation Easement was adopted by commissioners and will be headed to the Montana Land Board this fall. If adopted, Montana Land Board, this program will preserve an important wildlife migration corridor in year-round habitat for popular species, including elk, moose, mule deer, white-tailed deer, and west slope cutthroat trout, among others. All while guaranteeing that public hunting and fishing access is not closed. From the Wildlife Division, receiving guidance from the state legislature through House Bill 259, the commission is to consider new wolf management strategies to address ecological and social concerns. Several amendments were proposed for commissioners to consider for the 25-26 wolf season setting rules ahead of the meeting. Those amendments were further refined during the commission meeting. After a presentation from the agency staff, debate around the amendments, and extensive public comment, which included testimony from the Montana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chairs and members, the commission voted to adopt updated regulations for fur-bearing, wolf hunting, and trapping seasons. Those updates can be found in Marie's article with the in-article link. You can take that, deep dive that, and see all the latest and greatest on those updates. CSF facilitates sportsman engagement in the North American model wildlife conservation. During the rulemaking process, particularly for debated items like wolf management, collaboration between the agency, commission, legislators, and with sportsmen is essential. By working with the Montana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and members of the Montana Advisory Council, CSF ensures sportsmen's perspectives are represented, contributing to the policies that balance wildlife, conservation, department science, and outdoor access for Montana's future. Again, going back, as always, you can go to congressionalsportsman.org, get to the media center, pull up this week's EPUB of the Sportsman's Voice, and access those links for more information. Heading to the Northeast, Hunting Heritage Protection Acts in the Northeast. This is from Christian Ragosta. State wildlife agencies have a responsibility to protect access to public hunting lands and fishing access points, but not all states are mandated by statute. Hunting Heritage Protection Acts, or no net loss, ensure that if public land used for hunting and fishing is ever sold or used for some other purpose, equal or better lands will be acquired to maintain the level of public access for hunters and anglers. Some points here. Urbanization of populations means fewer individuals have access to private hunting property. Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, and New Jersey have forms of no net loss policies in the Northeast. Currently, New York offers over 4 million acres of public land for hunting, whereas Rhode Island has well under 100,000 acres, but both lack no net loss protections. Over the years, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has estimated fluctuating percentages that are between 30 and 40% of hunters use public land, which vary significantly depending on what part of the country you're in. In 2004, the inaugural NASC Annual Sportsman Legislative Summit, no net loss was identified as a necessary policy for states to adopt. Due to this, legislative sportsmen's caucuses in Tennessee and Virginia led some of the first legislatures to pass new no net loss policies by 2007. As recently as 2022 and 2023, Massachusetts and Connecticut passed protections for public land access. In Connecticut, Public Act number 9-173 explicitly sets a minimum amount of public land access for hunting. CSF is working with legislators in the Sportsmen's Caucuses, partners, and state agencies in both New York and Rhode Island to mirror neighboring states' efforts in protecting public access for hunters and anglers. Since 1971, Rhode Island has expressly been protecting freshwater and coastal wetlands for the benefit of the public. However, public land used for hunting does not currently have the same protections for the public's use. New York State, despite various efforts that attempt to protect lands and waters, requires a meaningful policy towards those protections and achievable goals. Although both New York and Rhode Island have these specific programs for conservation, neither state specifically addresses protections of maintaining public land that is currently usable for the purpose of hunting and fishing. Sportsmen and women who are the financial driving force of state fish, wildlife agencies, and their conservation efforts, the American System of Conservation Funding, should be assured that the public lands protected by their efforts should be usable by them for the purpose of hunting, fishing in perpetuity. No net loss sets an achievable goal for the New York Department of Environmental Conservation and Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. Current initiatives set an incredibly high bar for state agencies without considering the resources needed and available for appropriate scientific wildlife and land management. New York and Rhode Island have an opportunity to work with CSF and other state partners in the coming 26 legislative session to adopt a no net loss policy and protect public lands, hunting and fishing waterways for sportsmen and women's use. Jake Gould brings us the two-tier program that seeks to reduce a barrier to entry for duck hunters. The duck hunting season in Nebraska and South Dakota is right around the corner. Duck hunters in these states have two options when it comes to bag limits when they are registering their harvest information program, their HIP number. The two-tier option aims to address the issue of declining duck hunter numbers to ease the pressure on new and inexperienced hunters when it comes to identifying species and sex of the ducks. Nebraska entered this pilot program with South Dakota in 2021, with the test program running through 2025. The overall goal of this pilot program is to reduce the barrier for entry to increase the number of duck hunters into the future. While summer is coming to an end, hooray, it is almost time for duck hunters to hit their blinds and their favorite holes. Duck hunters in Nebraska and South Dakota have two options when they are registering their HIP numbers. This two-tier program, as we said earlier, began in 2021 and is set to sunset here in 2025 with the goal of seeking reduced barriers for new duck hunters, again, especially around the the waterfowl identification. The first tier offered is more traditional with a 6 duck limit, including all the species and sex requirements. Possession limit for tier 1 is 18 ducks. The tier 2 option has a bag limit of 3 ducks of any species or sex. The possession limit for tier 2 is 3 times the daily bag limit, or 9 ducks. For either tier, duck hunters are required to still have the proper permit stamps that are required by the State Fish and Wildlife Agency. It is important to note that these tiers do not apply to goose limits during the early teal season. For seasons and dates, more information on the two-tiered option and necessary permits needed, folks need to go check the State's Fish and Wildlife Agency's websites for more clarification. We covered this earlier. I think Jake brought this to us. Again, acknowledging my voice, this sounds terrible. I don't want to get too long on this show, but it's an interesting model. There are folks within the duck hunting community that find this controversial. And there's the other side of it, getting folks in and making new duck hunters. It is incredibly hard if you are not, I can speak from experience. If you are not a duck hunter, if you have a hard time with species and sex identification, and that all plays into your bag limits and not wanting to get in trouble or take the wrong animal for those management purposes that are internationally set. It's intimidating, and quite frankly, people like me will bow out and not participate in waterfowl. So there's a neat solve here. Certainly, they're not going to appreciate the same bag limits as folks in tier 1 that are able to do this and have good eyesight and can do a good duck ID. Um, Seems like an interesting compromise. We'll see how things pan out here, but got some options there in Nebraska and South Dakota. All right, let's wrap this up here. Hunter education in schools, is it coming to a state near you? Let's find out. This from Connor Barker. As efforts to bolster hunter recruitment, retention, and reactivation across the country ramp up, bringing basic hunter education to the classroom serves as an excellent avenue to support the next generation of sportsmen and women. And this next generation of hunters and anglers that will help sustain critical conservation funding needed to support our outdoor traditions is vitally important. Some key points here on February 13th, Georgia Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Representative Chas Cannon and Mark Dubnik, among other caucus members, and in close coordination with CSF, introduced House Bill 451, which would allow public schools to offer hunter safety education courses in grades 6 to 12. HB 451 specified that the curriculum for the course would be based on existing hunter education courses offered by the Georgia DNR. Additionally, it shall be up to each local board of education to incorporate courses, making the courses completely optional for students. CSF has encouraged and will continue to encourage legislators from other states to take a similar approach in bringing hunter ed courses to the classroom. For too long, hunters and anglers have been on the defense fighting against legislation that would have negative impact on sportsmen and women. To take this fight to the anti-hunting community, CSF has been working closely with legislative sportsmen caucus leaders from across the country to take proactive approach to sporting conservation policy. Among CSF's top proactive policy priorities, how's that for an alliteration? Proactive policy priorities is hunter education in the schools initiative. This policy priority is relatively simple to implement, gives parents the option to get their children involved in our time-honored traditions, teaches the next generation of Americans to understand the importance that hunting and angling have on the economy and wildlife conservation as a whole, and benefits the user pay public benefit structure of the American system of conservation funding by providing an opportunity to recruit new sportsmen and women. The American system of conservation funding has 3 pillars: revenue from sporting licenses and excise tax revenue from both wildlife and sport fish restoration programs. As today's hunters begin to age out of the sport, the next generation must step in to fill this inevitable funding gap. Efforts to get students involved in hunting at a young age will help fund conservation into the future and should be top of mind for sportsmen and women policymakers. Georgia made significant progress on the issue, has made significant progress on the issue in 2025. CSF and the Georgia caucus aim to get House Bill 451 over the finish line and signed into law when the Georgia General Assembly reconvenes in early 2026. Other states like Tennessee, for example, are primed to take similar approaches on hunter ed in schools in 2026. In 2024, Tennessee Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Representative Chris Todd successfully sponsored House Bill 2882, which allows local school districts to provide students with age and grade appropriate instruction on firearm safety. An appropriate next step in Tennessee would be to expand this instruction, offering hunter ed courses. CSF applauds caucus leaderships in Georgia and looks forward to working with Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus leaders in the Southeast and beyond to expand opportunities to share our time-honored traditions with next generation of sportsmen and women. If anything, out of the hunter ed in school, being able to tell a story of how this whole system works, how it's funded, how the structure is set up is a huge story, and the history of it, the genesis of it, and where we've come in almost 100 years, what preceded it 125 years ago or so, and why it motivated so many conservation-minded folks, all stakeholders, to come together and put a solution on the backs of sportsmen and women, with Pittman Robinson first, followed by Lincoln Johnson some years later. So, if nothing else, getting that message and that story and that history across to these kids is vitally important, so they're not completely disconnected from it and just think everything works out and everything's on the landscape because it is. It's quite intentional, and it's managed in a way to maximize the quality of life, to the habitat, and for all Americans and visitors to enjoy what is some of the finest management and opportunity of wildlife interactions in the world. So anyway, it's a great initiative. I think back to archery in gym class. Like, that's it's not a far stretch. Like, this is easy stuff. And working with the state agencies and copying their hunter ed curriculum and adding to it, this should pretty much be plug and play. So anyway, thank you, Connor, for that. That's our show this week. Again, thanks for hanging with me in the voice. A lot of us are traveling this time of year, getting ready for pre-session filing, and then working with our leaders, gearing up with our executive council of NASC, getting ready for the coming NASC summit as referenced beginning of the program. So make sure you're signing up for it. Please make sure you're pulling out your phone when you're not driving. Hit those 5 stars, follow, subscribe, Apple, iTunes, podcasts, Spotify podcasts. You can do all that in about 20 seconds. I would appreciate it. I'm going to leave it there, put a bow on it. We'll connect with y'all next week, bringing you the same news from around the nation. Until then, be safe out there. Get ready. If you're not already enjoying hunting season, there's a lot of folks already having success here in the last couple of weeks. So congratulations to those of us that are coming into it in the coming days. Best time of the year. Here we go. Until next time, folks, remember, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We'll see you next time. So long.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review,
being able to tell a
filling
story
in those
of
5 stars where available,
if anything,
sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram,
being able to tell a story
X,
of
formerly known as Twitter.
How this
Together,
the American
we
System
can
of
protect the
Conservation
outdoor
Funding has
sports
3
we
pillars,
love and continue to
too
keep
long.
you informed
Hunters and
wherever
anglers.
you are. That's it for this
Jake
week.
Gould brings
Until next
us
time, we'll see you later.
the 2-tier program. Heading to the Northeast, from the Fisheries Division, recommendations from the Citizen Review Panel for the Future Fisheries Improvement Program projects were adopted, enhancing fish habitats, critical for anglers and aquatic ecosystems, bringing around $680,000 of aid. The decisions at the commission meeting influenced the Montana Commission's August 21st about my voice and sounding. Thank you to. In April of this year, President Trump issued an EO on the Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness. Since that time, the 8 regional fishery management councils have been soliciting stakeholder input on how to best address the opportunities presented by them. CSF recently partnered with the American Sport Fishing Association and the Coastal Conservation Association. Despite the increase in offshore recreational fishing in recent decades, federal marine fisheries management is still predominantly designed for commercial fisheries, where the primary value is in the maximum sustainable number of dead fish to be sold at the dock. The highest value for the nation from recreational fishing, on the other hand, is simply the opportunity to go fishing whether fish are caught or not in many cases. President Trump's recent Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness executive order provided an opportunity to highlight the value of recreational fishing and how it could be made better. In 2022 alone, recreational saltwater anglers in the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council region took 9 million fishing trips, supported 27,000 jobs, and spent $3.54 billion to take those trips. A presidential executive order early this year provided a formal opportunity for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation and others to weigh in on how we can manage our marine recreational fisheries for the better.